Thanks very much, John. The essence of this gathering is to hear ideas. It's not about decoding, analysing, and putting to pieces or giving a thumbs up to the presenters. It's just a taster, and everybody is equal in terms of what is being thrown into the pot. That's the idea of what this is, and it's a taster, and then it goes forward in terms of you connecting and following through and saying, I heard that, I'm interested, I want to get hold of that. That's really what the Institute is about. These are 3 ideas that we're throwing out. You're going to be kind of standing up saying, this is who I am and this is what I want to talk to. We don't want to decode the questions. We want to be hearing about what is happening, what you recommend, or some of the issues that you want to throw into the pot. I'll read them for you. Do we have an integrated system of communication on safety that allows for the very local community to identify, define, express their own safety needs? It's just a thought to stimulate you sharing. Allows for pro-social ways of defining community safety that attract and excite people. Allows for affordable methods to monitor and measure progress according to community definitions of safety.
My remarks go to the issue of community and defining community. My work is principally about engaging the unusual suspects in policy processes, so expanding participation. And I absolutely agree with the comments around ensuring that we have strong communication systems and we don't end up pushing out part of the community, as John has pointed out. But I really think that we have to be, in our processes and in our work, looking at how, when communities define themselves, they can replicate the power structures that exist within that community. And the invisible and marginalized people within that community remain invisible and marginalized. So there are different groups of people who are marginalized or excluded in a range of different ways, from persons with disabilities, at times children, sometimes elderly. I mean, we can think of different groups or categories of people that require different responses. And I think that creating the spaces for community engagement on safety, whether it be mapping exercises or working in neighbourhood watches, whatever it may be, need to look at things like the times when we have these meetings, what time of day, the places, where it's advertised. Are we sitting with a room full of adult men and elder women? Is that who's defining community here? So I think really having a nuanced approach and thinking through when we are the people who are responsible for trying to start to facilitate spaces, to make sure that those spaces don't replicate what exists already.
Richard, in defining your community, I think you left about 1.5 million people out. And basically, those are people that are coming from another community into our community, and I really think that should be included. That is our main concern in economic development and tourism, the safety and security of our tourists and visitors from elsewhere in the country. We have had, we recognised this way back in 2004, and we have a very comprehensive tourism safety and support program, which is also monitored and evaluated on a monthly and yearly basis, so we know where we come from and where we're going. Very briefly, it's divided into 2 sections. The first is responding to an incident, not usurping the authority of the police or the emergency services, but trying to put that tourist back together again and on their way, as it were, so that they leave knowing that they might have had an unpleasant experience, but the people of South Africa care. So it's very much a caring type of function that we run, and we have a huge network of liaison with most of the agencies that are here today and that you've spoken about, including the embassies and others. The most important one, and you'll understand this, is and was mentioned earlier, is the question of communication. So we have a proactive program where we try and help assist visitors to understand that there are dangers no matter where you are and what the situation is. And if you don't mind, we've taken the liberty of leaving a little flyer on the table, just giving the background to what we do and the safety tips that we are putting out. So that is the program that we've been running. Mangizi, my colleague here, actually does the proactive side, and it's working extremely well. Thank you very much.
Just a comment on the Soccer World Cup, right, and what it was like. And at the Centre of Criminology, we did a a very intensive survey of interviews before, during and after to try and understand what was going on. Just to put it very briefly, it's all about partnerships, and partnership is such a cliche, but what made it work was that the pressure was on to deliver. It would have been an utter disgrace if there had been any big problems. And so the police were the lead agency in this. And I have to say that on the whole, certainly at the higher levels, SAPs are not known for being very sharing and respectful in partnerships. That is unfortunately the case. On the local level, it can be very different. But after a little bit of heavy negotiations, SAPs recognized, and the people who were leading it, recognized incredibly well and with imagination and respect how necessary it was to get everybody given the appropriate degree of respect, so that, and not just in a bland sentimental way, we need you in order to do that, and we will provide the space for you to do that, and we need you for that and you for you. And it would vary from biological stuff from the military to absolutely down-to-earth community stuff, giving each recognition for having its own place in the puzzle. And that's what partnership is about. Unfortunately, since then, things kind of relapse again, because we're not under that pressure. So the question is, how can we create the incentives and pressure for ourselves and everyone else in order to create mutually respectful, practical definitions of partnership? That's a challenge.
What I'd like to say is just the emphasis on partnerships and the fact that we, as an NGO, have been feeling for quite a while that we're working in a silo. Our focus is mainly on schools, and although we do have the advantage of working very closely with one district in the school metropole, in the various metropoles, there is a feeling about NGOs that we are either a bunch of tree huggers or dissidents trying to create a revolution. And that's not necessarily true. I think that what we do see ourselves as in this South African community that we find ourselves in is as a support structure for the existing infrastructure. And so the idea of working in partnership with local government and various other businesses has never been more necessary than it is today. And so I'd like to get rid of that reputation that NGOs have rightly or wrongly had in the past, is that we're not there to cause trouble. We are critical, but then, everybody should be critical. But the idea of working, we have our eyes and ears on the ground, and people say things to members of the NGO community that they won't say to local government or to people in authority, and therefore we have information, but we also need to work within the infrastructure in order to support it. Thanks.
I just want to speak with regards to defining communities. We are based in Mitchell's Plain. And if we talk about effective partnership, it boils down to the ordinary citizen within the street. And that is what has been done in Mitchell's Plain in order to form that effective partnership with all role players or stakeholders for that matter. We have established street committees in Mitchell's Plain. Now, street committees has a long history, but there was a specific focus in Mitchell's Plain, which was, the catalyst was crime. But the focus is not just going to stay on crime, it's going to be a developmental agenda, because you need to develop your own street in order to effectively have participation from everybody within the street and also your whole community, which means that all of them would benefit from the developmental agenda. And I think that was effective for us in Mitchell's Plain, which basically proved that we could register more than 2,000 people in particular areas that participated within street committees. So for us, that partnership, because then you don't isolate or marginalize the community, because that voice will be heard via the structures that way.
I think both presentations are really informative, and I think a lot of it is based on individuals and organizations that are willing to work with different structures to promote safety and increase safety in their communities. How do you approach communities that have so-called gatekeepers who have ulterior motives, possibly, and don't always represent everybody in that community, but that community can represent themselves as long as that individual is there or that organization. How do you deal with those situations?
Gatekeepers usually arise the more centralized you get. So that if you, like this one person was talking about street committees, I thought it was a great thing that she said. The more you get down to the local level, the less you're going to have that kind of gatekeeping going on. The more centralized you get power going, then you have more gatekeepers. And I think it's the centralization of power that leads to a lot of our problems as well. And, accounts for a lot of things that we have going on in South Africa, where we're not actually distributing the goods to society that we need to. You can be capturing corruption and other things like that. The more steep the hierarchy, the less you get delivered on the ground, and the less voice people have on the ground. And you have to say we have a pretty steep system of hierarchy still in this country. It's a budding young democracy.
There's two things that I want to try and highlight. I do concur with the wards splitting communities. From a policing point of view, we have police station services, a community, 2 police stations. You've got a different service level to that. And we need to highlight that to find out more from various communities how they are serviced. Same with the ward allocation from councillors. You have one community being serviced by 2 councillors, but their ward projects differ. So one portion of the ward gets street cleaning and the other portion of that community doesn't get it. So I think we need to have a look at that as well and see how that impacts on our communities. Thank you.
I just want to make 2 comments. The first about accessing local knowledge of safety issues. One of the things we're doing working with safety volunteers, we call them safety volunteers rather than neighbourhood watch because they can have a much wider range of functions, is after every duty that's performed there's the expectation that people submit a very simple incident report. And it can be a very small thing of a group of kids hanging around a street corner, it could be a broken light, it could be a fight that they saw. And this generates local knowledge which is mapped and is used as a supplement to the police data, which is completely different and deals with different issues. And in the absence of that knowledge, it's the police data that determines where neighbourhood watches are allocated. It can often not be around community priorities. The second issue I want to raise is a call to all of us who are working with volunteers in any way. And there are many projects that rely on volunteers in many state programs, the public work program, the rest of them that are available. We don't have any common approach to volunteers. We don't have any common way of recognizing volunteers. And a simple thing, for example, if public posts, one of the criteria used for the selection of somebody to a public post was an audited record of volunteering, that would provide incentives to people to become involved on a voluntary basis. And many of the projects that have been described as being successful fail on the issue of sustainability. But if we were using existing public opportunities to resource volunteerism, we would have a sustainable source of volunteers. That's one of the projects that we'd like to work with anybody involved in volunteering to come up with a policy on that basis.
We are currently busy with a project called Scratch Maps, where we work in a local community within the Strand region, where we're looking at promotion of peace and safety within this community. We've done asset mapping workshops with local community, 3 asset mapping workshops as part of our baseline data. And the community identified themselves and they defined themselves as a community. But how we got into the community was identifying key stakeholders within this community and calling them all to a particular meeting that we had. And we presented to them what we would like to do within the community. And then they came up with the ideas of what they would like to be addressed. And violence was a key issue in this community as well as substance abuse. And this then became part of our study. And then after the 3 asset mapping workshops with the local community, we held one with service providers where we mapped all the service providers that does work in the local community. And we connected them together. And thereafter, this was followed by an action planning workshop and looking how we can bring about change within the community. And now we're in the process of bringing on board all stakeholders that work with violence prevention and identifying what we can do, looking at best practice models on how we can prevent violence, and then we will develop an intervention, evaluate it, and do what you said we should do. Thank you.
I thought I would just share a model that we have just launched in the Mitchell's Play. It's based on a pilot that we run in KZN. We're training local community members as mediators that work with the courts and get cases referred by the courts to them, as well as also community referrals and working with schools issues, so conflict issues. So basically alternative dispute resolution. But the reason why the model has worked quite well is that we link the mediation to services that deal with the underlying issues, whether it's substance abuse or victim empowerment needs or any other programs. And this is again where I would also like to see that more partnerships happen, because any model is basically, if it wants to be sustainable, we need more than one organization or one government department. And so we're looking at most effective ways of linking to those services. Thank you.
I just want to tap into the silo word that Richard talked about and the fragmentation in how we work. And I think South Africa is not short of innovation and solutions at a local level. I think there's a wealth of information, there's a wealth of NGOs, governments doing so many different projects, local government. But I think in creating a comprehensive approach as to how we work on the ground level, and maybe it's a question more than anything. I know local government has integrated development plans. I feel the problem we have is that we all divide ourselves into those sectors, whether it's crime or women and children, and we may be innovating in that, and we don't necessarily look at a specific community and develop a strategy in terms of a broader developmental agenda. And I think that's what the local government level is doing, but I don't know if we all link to that plan. And because we developed a model, we used to work with victims of crime, and it was got a long history. It was called the Community Victim Support Model. And that model, although we were working with crime and victims, our thing was that we had to link the broader developmental agenda. And so we created community teams that looked at a broader plan. And although we were just working with victims, we linked with others that together with community, we developed a 4 to 5 year plan in terms of let's map out what's our common vision and common goals. I come from Negro and we've got set objectives for this particular plan, but how do we bring what we want to achieve into a broader community agenda, and that we can negotiate with communities and set goals and objectives for that particular community or geographical space. And although it wasn't sustained in the end, it had a really, and I think that's what's important, how do we sustain it?
So John, thank you very much. I've just told the accountant to authorize the payment. Thanks for the program. I was just going to stand up and say, and I've heard all the fantastic models around here, and I was also going to say, we've also got these beautiful models that are working for us in the city. And with us, we're very diverse in the sense that we've got various different communities, more like a nomadic community, because during the day we've got your retailers and your business. They just come and go and they change all the time. We've got our residential community, then we've got our neighborhoods up there. So we basically got everything in one day. We have to deal with everything. And what we actually found is just to, just by inculcating a culture of law abidance, it actually works. And that's the sad thing here is that it's something simple like just crossing the road. And if you see a tourist that comes from a different country, and you stand there and you tell him no cross, you point to that green man. No, I'm waiting for that green man. But our guys are running across the road, whether the traffic light's green or red, and just down to that basic fundamental that, you've got to have that culture inside you already. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to make is listening to all these different models for different solutions for different problems. It doesn't make sense that we have a centralized place. Maybe the Western Cape Department of Community Safety can hold a list of all these models. And then when you have a specific problem, you can actually go and see, hey, there is a solution for this. Let me go and learn about this best practice, because they're not readily available. If I didn't come here today, I wouldn't know that this and that it's this. So why don't we have a database of where these things exist, so that I can actually go and then focus on what I actually want to do for my community. If there's a working example, we need to learn that. So that's the actual point I want to make.
I just want to comment on the thing on the gateway. How do you get past the whole thing where gatekeepers is the whole concern? We did sometime a project called community-based planning, which was in connection with this whole IDP process. We discovered that there were some people who was gatekeepers, we couldn't get past the thing. What's important in this regard, to bypass them, you have to go to the community. You have to involve all the role players in the community. But the problem is that people, when they come in as officials to do those things, they just highlight a certain few people, get a few people, or they will come and say, okay, who's the leaders here? And those leaders are the gatekeepers, which then you don't get through to the people. So to bypass those people is to go direct to the community underground. And also what's important here, you must identify every organization in the community to be involved people. If you can get that, and that is when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, because you must when we went in this program with the community-based planning, we went to we arranged a meeting with all the religious people in the area. We got every religious church, mosque, everybody on board, and we guide them to get representatives out of them to represent their persons, or there was two persons, to be representative on the community-based structure. So that is important. Just say, this is the leader, because those are the gatekeepers. When people say you're the leader, those are the gatekeepers. So to bypass them, you must go direct to the ground and engage with the people on the ground and get those people involved. That's how you will be able to pass the gatekeepers.
Thanks. I'm taking a slightly different direction from the database and repositories of information. Just when Vanessa spoke, she repeated what Richard had raised, which is the issue of sustainability. Doing pilots, they're great. And there are two things that I think about in light of this. The one is that I've only been around for 15 years doing this kind of work, and over that time there's a great difference in Cape Town in the number and the nature of the programs that we're running. There's definitely a shift. I think those of you in the room have been around 20, 25, some of you perhaps 30, I don't know. But for a longer time, we'll have a better sense of that shift. So some of that happens in this kind of space where people with an investment in this work, with an interest and a will, are sitting around, sharing ideas, learning things, understanding things differently, and hopefully doing things differently. At the same time, we're all aware that gang violence is big again. Every couple of years it spikes in the media. Those of us working on it, it kind of gets more crazed and then slightly less and then more crazed. And I'm not so close to it anymore. But it's a cyclic thing. And so there's the other question which links to sustainability, which is the issue of the politics. And I'm speaking for the Western Cape. I think you'll have questions at a national level as well. But I do think that there's an issue around the way in which the politics of this province, the changing MECs, the changing in community sector and so on, have affected the bigger plans and funding towards projects and sustainability. Because this issue of political ownership is an issue of the alignment towards a particular strategy of a particular MEC or a premier or whatever political party. And I really think that we have to have this conversation at this level and take it for what it is, because it has enormous value. And I think from the example you spoke about, the main value where we're getting things right is where we take things on and own it without the big political leadership. But that does have impact as well in the directions that are taken. So I think that there is some call for accountability to the leadership in the province around its strategies and its planning in this respect.
Hi, I just wanted to add 3 comments of things that really came out today I think were really great. One of them was on street committees. That they're getting very, very local. It made me think. I think, yes, in order to get past those gatekeepers, in order to get a real community voice, you actually have to come to level we call the community, get right down to the street. I think that was great. I also think that mapping some people supported me, my mapping point of view, I just want to stress that again. Cheap, easy to look at, easy to monitor and evaluate. It's a great way to go. And then lastly, somebody mentioned reviewing. Very important to review practice. And sometimes if people are uncomfortable with monitoring and evaluation and can't afford it, a very affordable way to get good monitoring and evaluation information out is to review various practices. And in doing so, you can look across several different things that have been done, maybe 7, 8, 10 practices, and extract from that the lessons learned and come up with some very good and valuable information. Thank you very much.
From our side, there's only one more thing to say, and that's thank you very much. Hope to see you again. Thank you very much.